Yavapai Broadcasting and the City of Cottonwood proudly present Inside Cottonwood, an inside look at the decisions and issues of the City of Cottonwood. Brought to you by Arizona Smile Designers.
Welcome to Inside Cottonwood. I'm Diane Jones, Mayor of Cottonwood, your host for this segment. And today we have with us BillCowan, an old friend of mine. We've known each other for years, and it's taken me quite a few months to get him on the show because he's so busy. But I just want to share a little bit of information about Bill, and he can add to it if he likes, but he's a community volunteer, of course. I know for a fact that he has spent hours upon hours, hundreds of, not thousands of hours, volunteering in his community. He was born in Phoenix, and he graduated from the School of Forestry at Northern Arizona University back in 1970, huh? And his hobbies are backpacking, historic restoration, and computers. Anything to add to that? Any new hobbies since I interviewed you for the Almanac?
Yeah, and actually that's a long time ago in itself, and I'm amazed that the Cottonwood Almanac, or the Verde Valley Almanac is, that's becoming quite a collector's item. But one of the true recreations that I have and enjoyments that I have these days is rescuing old historic photographs of Central Arizona. And with the advent of Facebook, sharing local history and the history of Arizona. So I do a lot of photographic restoration. Also recently I just did a National Register nomination of the Back Ranch Historic District at Montezuma Well National Monument. What was originally, or what is now Montezuma Well National Monument, was truly, and Montezuma Well is mostly focused on archaeology, but there was a huge amount of Anglo history that went on at the well as well.
So have you gotten that written, or are you in the process of writing it?
No,
and
it's
people
already,
can read it on Facebook?
Not the National Register nomination. It is at Park Service now, at the regional in Albuquerque, with a local guy by the name of Bob Spooty. Okay. And he and I are working it over. It's gone through the State Historic Preservation Office and has been approved by them. So, but in any case, I have been doing a certain amount of historic consulting in association with that as well.
So people can learn more about what's going on historically in the Verde Valley and even all of Arizona by contacting or reading your Facebook page or asking to be a friend to it?
You bet.
And is it under William or Bill?
It's under BillCowan, Rimrock, Arizona. And I write history. I also bore people with some of my adventures as far as sharing photographs of, for example, I'm going camping down the Great Western Trail this coming week. My wife has it's her fall break, and we're loading up our Ranger and heading off down the Great Western Trail into Bloody Basin, some area that I've never, I've been through Bloody Basin all of my life, but never down the Great Western Trail segment. So
the Great Western Trail is going from south to north? Is that
the Great Western Trail is actually
through Wood Chute Mountain, I think.
The Great Western Trail is actually was sort of predicated and came about after the Arizona Trail, but it goes from Canada to Mexico. Okay. And much of it is already completed across Arizona. So you can ride in an OHV basically from Mexico to Utah across across Arizona. Parts of it, sort of like Arizona Trail. I mean, there are a huge number of users of Arizona Trail, getting to be more and more of them all the time.
Do those two trails intersect sometimes? Are they ever the same trail, or are they
No.
totally separate?
Right. One is hiking, biking, equestrian trail, and hiking over some of the segments. And the Great Western Trail is a DOHV equivalent.
Now, you've been involved with trails, I know, for years, and you were instrumental in getting, was it the Bell Trail? I
was
Sedona?
I worked at Red Rock State Park in the early 90s, and as a component of that, I had always been interested in trails. I mean, I was a Boy Scout in Phoenix in the 50s, was raised hiking, and hiked throughout the Metazols. And so I went to work for state parks in the early 90s. And as a function of that, I became a member of what was known as Red Rock Pathways, an interesting Kiwanis-supported trail project. One day, one of the Kiwanis members tried to ride a bicycle from Village of Oak Creek into Sedona through historically what used to be called the the roller coaster. And he realized he was taking his life in his hands. And so, interestingly, they began to advocate for a 35-mile interconnected loop of trails that would go from Village of Oak Creek into the city of Sedona, out through West Sedona, down to Lower Red Rock Loop Road, and then down Lower Red Rock Loop Road, returning back to the Village of Oak Creek. Interestingly, over time, that project, Red Rock Pathways, became adopted into the Sedona Urban Trail System, and also a good number of the Coconino National Forest trails were either components of Red Rock Pathways or were spurs off of that. So as the community services director of Red Rock Pathways, I served on a team that came up with the original concept for what is today the Bell Rock Pathway. And the universal thing, we got an ICE-T grant. The unusual and sort of groundbreaking component of that was there was a guy by the name of Bob Aberg up there. And
I remember Bob and worked with him.
Bob was quite the politician, and he came up with the concept when you do ICE-T, when you get ICE-T funding, you have to have a match, and we didn't have any money. But Forest Service was willing they were putting in the pipeline then, and they were also undergrounding a historic phone line that had been going through there. And they were so dedicated to the trail that they allowed us to use the right-of-way, the actual real estate value of the right-of-way, which they were granting, as the match.
Great.
And so we wrote this ICE-T grant that was almost $1 million that funded the construction of the Bell Rock Pathway.
And then you also have been you've studied in the past the Chavez Trail, and we just have a couple minutes until a break. You want to share a little bit of information about the Chavez Trail?
Well, interestingly, Jose Francisco Chavez, he provided the military escort for the original gubernatorial party. Most people don't appreciate, but where we are sitting historically was Indian country. Then it was following Columbus. It was claimed by Mexico. And then following the Mexican War, it became the United States of America, but was part of the territory of New Mexico. In fact, I think we're in Valencia County originally of what was New Mexico territory. Well, during the Civil War, the rebels were all gone, and it was decided that the United States, following the recognition of the territory of Arizona as a Confederate territory, that the United States of America would establish the territory of Arizona. So They didn't want, the capital of the Confederate state of Arizona was Tucson, and they certainly didn't want their new governor going to Tucson, so that they set up a new seat of government at Del Rio. And interestingly, Jose Francisco Chavez came along providing the military escort for these Washington, D.C. lame duck bureaucrats who became the first Arizona territorial government. Well, Chavez, on his way home, decided that he would go by a different way, and he crossed the Verde Valley and went on ultimately to what would become Winslow. So the Chavez Wagon Road became then the shortcut that would bring new settlers into the Verde, rather than go up over near Flagstaff, fight the snow in the wintertime. The Chavez Cutoff, as it was known, became a way to come into the Verde. So I've been a long-standing advocate for cross-state trails, and the Chavez Wagon Road was one way, in my vision, that people might be able to ride horseback or a bicycle or hike across the urbanizing Verde Valley. If it's much easier to preserve historic byways than it is to get anybody to agree on a new bike trail anywhere.
That's true.
So I've been an advocate for the Chavez Wagon Road essentially forever.
All right. Well, it's time to take a little break. We'll be right back in just a moment, and we'll talk a little bit about Cottonwood history.
Meet the team at Arizona Smile Designers, offering complete, comprehensive, restorative, and aesthetic dentistry. Dr. Vergara and Dr. Lord specialize in dental health, implants, and cosmetic dental procedures. Expert staff and state-of-the-art equipment bring forth the most from your smile. Dr. Ripplinger conveniently comes to Arizona Smile Designers for oral surgery and complicated procedures. Visit Arizona Smile Designers at 350 South Willard in Cottonwood. Insurance and new patients are welcome. Call 634-8610.
Welcome back to Inside Cottonwood. We have today as our guest BillCowan. And let's just start off this piece of the show by talking about the Rio Verde Reservation.
Okay, well, interestingly, in the beginning, when Chavez came, along with Governor John Goodwin and McCormick and those people who were the original territorial government, in 1865, the first settlers came down into the Verde, and they settled at what was then known as Clear Fork, became the Clear Fork settlement. And of course, they were taking away the Indians' homeland. I mean, an area that had been occupied by the Yavapai and Apache people for centuries. And so within 6 months of the establishment of the Clear Fork settlement, the Indians were stealing corn and running off cattle and generally harassing those people. So it was very shortly then that the military established what was originally known as Fort Lincoln, Camp Lincoln, and later that evolved into Camp Verde. And in 1871, Vincent Collier established what came to be known as the Rio Verde Reservation. Basically, they set aside everything from the confluence of Beaver Creek up the center line of the river, 40 miles, almost all the way to Paulden, and 10 miles on either side of the river, and they set it up permanently as the Rio Verde Reservation. When Crook came in 1872, Crook came in 1871, he set up and recognized the importance of the Verde Valley and he prosecuted the Indian Wars in a way that had never been done before. And basically he brought to heel all of the Native American people in central Arizona, almost 2,800, 3,000 of which were soon ensconced on the Rio Verde Reservation. And they established a ditch that first year, spring of 1873, immediately up the creek from what would come to be Cottonwood. And 4 miles of ditch, had 57 acres under cultivation, and were well on their way towards self-sufficiency. And I don't know if you've got the photographs of, there are interestingly 3 historic photographs of the Rio Verde Reservation that were taken by a guy by the name of Dudley Flanders. That was here. Well, these are sort of pre-Anglo. I mean, it was visioned that the Upper Verde would become, you know, a permanent habitation site given to the Indians. Well, the Indians were marched away in 1875 and taken to San Carlos then, and that opened what would come to be Cottonwood, or all of the Upper Verde Valley, Cottonwood, Clarkdale, Jerome, the whole Upper Verde Valley was then thrown open for civilization. And
which was a very, very sad time in the lives of the native peoples.
Oh, you bet. A horrible time.
Yeah.
But the thing that's underappreciated by most local historians was that as this virgin land of the Verde was opened for settlement, here flooded in then the early settlers. And if you were a settler and you had come in a wagon from Missouri or whatever, here was the unclaimed remnants. Here were agricultural fields, irrigation ditches. Here were the remnants of the Rio Verde Reservation then.
Was the Cottonwood Ditch in existence then already?
Yeah. And all the way down to the Cottonwood Cemetery. I mean, if you look at the 1877 map, the Wingfields, Morris Andrew, Ruffner.
They had a ranch in Bridgeport, as I understand it.
Wingfields were actually right where the Cottonwood Cemetery is. And that was essentially the Cottonwood Cemetery in the area between Main Street and the Verde was where the 57 acres of original cultivation was. Strahans, Bristows, and of course in 1879 then there were 4 Willard sons showed up. They came on July 1st, and within 2 weeks the oldest and the youngest of that family drowned. Here they were repairing the original diversion that had diverted water into the Indian ditch. And they were out there throwing rocks trying to get the water back into the Cottonwood ditch. And they managed to turn the boat over, and the water was so swift. It was June 1st. And back then the river ran a good deal harder than it did now. But in any case, they were both of them drowned in that tragic accident. But then 2 of the sons sent ultimately for their mother and the rest of their family, and they then built what is the Willard House today, immediately on the north end of Main Street, Cottonwood.
And it's still there. It's a beautiful home.
Yes.
I think Mike and Nancy Burnett are the owners now.
Yeah, Nancy Burnett was is such a character and a wonderful contributor. I did a lot of environmental education with Nancy Burnett, and you talk, you know, in this day when women are struggling for women's rights, Nancy Burnett never let anything stand in her way. I think you're also kind of an example of that. But
she's an awesome lady.
Nancy Burnett, when she decided she wanted to do something, by golly,
she got it done. So dedicated to children's issues and education, and And the river, the Verde River, and so, yeah. And so that house was built in...
It was built in the late 1880s. The Willards had been up there on the north end and also on the west side of what is today Main Street. They had homesteaded, and actually they bought property that had already been homesteaded that became Mary Willard's homestead. She homesteaded part of it and bought part of it. And she had this vision for building this beautiful home, a Victorian era. I mean, it's really a fancy place. And but the rest of the story is that her daughter, Fanny Willard, was being romanced by one of the other heavy hitter families of the early Verde Valley, and that was the family of William Munns. His youngest son, John Munns, was courting and ultimately married Fanny Willard. And the rest of the story is that that house had to be completed. It had to be done for the guests in order for the wedding to go on there. An interesting sidelight to that, they were married in March. The preacher was coming from across the river. The river was in flood stage, and the preacher couldn't get across the river. Fanny's cousin, let's see, Dolph Willard, I think was his name. He had been he would become a Rough Rider, but in any case, he was quite a horseman. And he rode across the river horseback and grabbed up Reverend Wines and said, "You're here to produce the wedding." And he said, "Well, my horse can't make it across the street or across the raging river." And Dolph said, "Well, get on him, I'll put my rope on him," and away they went across the river. So that Wine's pants were wet during the ceremony, and it was about 2 hours, 3 hours late, something like that. It actually was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon and went on about 5, 6, 7 at night. The
what a great story.
So.
Well, we have to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk about the bricks that were used in that home.
Oh, yes.
So right now we'll take a break. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Meet the team at Arizona Smile Designers, offering complete comprehensive, restorative, and aesthetic dentistry. Dr. Vergara and Dr. Lord specialize in dental health, implants, and cosmetic dental procedures. Expert staff and state-of-the-art equipment bring forth the most from your smile. Dr. Ripplinger conveniently comes to Arizona Smile Designers for oral surgery and complicated procedures. Visit Arizona Smile Designers at 350 South Willard in Cottonwood. Insurance and new patients are welcome. Call 634-8610.
Hello, I'm Mayor Diane Jones. We're back with Inside Cottonwood and Bill Cowan, and we were talking about the old Willard house, the original home in Cottonwood, down in Old Town near the Verde River. And where were the materials for that home made?
Actually, the Willard, I think Charlie Willard had a brick refactory right there on site. They made bricks up there, but cement, the mortar, was actually manufactured at the lime kiln. So that
and that is on Dead Horse Ranch State Park property right now.
Yes, immediately. I think it. I think it is preserved in Dead Horse Ranch, but the bricks were, the Verde limestone makes an excellent brick. I mean, all the bricks up in Clarkdale, a lot of the bricks for the stack at Clemenceau were made locally here because the Verde limestone does so well. But the source of cement, and of course right now one of the larger employers around is the Clarkdale cement plant. Well, the local cement the place where cement was made was at the lime kiln, which is, and of course, you and others worked on the Lime Kiln Trail, which interconnects Red Rock State Park with...
I think that was Fran Wetton and Diane Lovett.
Yeah, you bet. But, well, you were supporting that when you were working for Chip Davis, et cetera.
Yes, I was.
The other house, and Cottonwood, Main Street Cottonwood basically didn't evolve as a business district until Clemenceau and Clarkdale, where were these two smelter towns, and so that activities were restricted in those company towns, and the only place that you could go and have a drink
and have a business and do what you wanted
was Cottonwood.
Right.
And so they brushed out Main Street Cottonwood.
1908, if I recall.
Two of the early homes were, of course, the Mary Grace Willard House on the north end and the Strahan House on the south end, and they were both made with those classic local bricks and mortar from the lime kiln. Unfortunately, the Strahan House was demolished a few years ago, but
yes, that was a sad day in Cottonwood.
It was this beautiful, you had them like bookends on Old Town. And I got to say, Old Town has come a long way in the last, last 8-10 years.
Absolutely. It's just the greatest place to go, and it has its history. It looks, at the past and looks forward to the future,
and I would like to plug the Cottonwood Hotel and Karen Leff. And the work that Glenda Farley and others are doing relative to preserving history in Cottonwood. And Karen Leff does a wonderful walking tour of Old Town Cottonwood, so that if anybody has the opportunity, go bang on the door and get the schedule for Karen's walking tour. She does a wonderful job of interpreting the history, and of course supports Rhythm and Ribs and all of the other.
Does. And they're also, Glenda and Karen are both on the Cottonwood Historical Commission. And I think you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Well, all I have to say is that you could not ask for two harder working volunteers, and Glenda Farley is serving on that committee. She has a wonderful blog on the Verde Independent called Verde Heritage, which if you have the opportunity to read on their website, she does just a fantastic job of interpreting local history from Jerome all the way to Clear Fork, what is today Clear Creek, and the original settlers down there. But their efforts at identifying and preserving historic resources in and around Cottonwood is exemplary. And I think you're really fortunate to have those two who don't stand in the way women.
Yeah, they're just great people. And like you said, we just mentioned again that you can, at the Cottonwood Hotel with Karen Leff, you can go in and get a tour of Old Town, and that's a great thing to do. So we just have another minute left. We did want to talk about, how all of the communities were interact with history, but we also want to mention this book. You want to share a little bit of information about this book?
Actually, Chip Davis asked me to serve on the Yavapai County Centennial Committee, the Arizona Centennial Committee in '09. And as a function of serving on that committee, I realized that the historic community that had been the Verde, people didn't think that they were from a single place other than the valley. They were all intermarried. People from Sedona were intermarried with people from Cottonwood. Mm-hmm. All of those people provided meat and grapes and wine and vegetables and anything else that they grew as Jerome replaced Fort Verde as a source of cash in the Verde everybody worked together, they socialized together, they intermarried, they knew each other. And with the sort of fractionalizing of communities, you know, they have divided, I'm not from the Verde, I'm from Cottonwood, or I'm not from the Verde, I'm from Camp Verde, or I'm not, and certainly in Sedona, they don't even consider themselves to be in the Verde Valley. Well, I know when I was a kid, if you were from anywhere around in this vicinity, you were from the Verde Valley. And so I wanted to put together this Arcadia book that celebrated that history of the Verde and try to reunite the people and recognize the commonality. For example, the Cottonwood Post Office, the Cornville Post Office were both established on the same day. The original stage, as it came from Camp Verde, went through Altman into Cornville, finally into Cottonwood. I mean, you could ride the stage, it took all day long. So, in any case, I put together this work, the history of the Verde Valley Arcadia book. It's available at Adventures Unlimited, Bent River. One of the greatest places that it's sold is at the Cottonwood Ace Hardware and Verde Valley, or at Camp Verde Historical Society. Also available at Kennedy's Creekside Cottage in McGuireville, which is my daughter's store there.
Okay. Well, it's been great interviewing you today, and I think that we could talk for 5 or 6 hours about history. I know we could, but unfortunately we just had a half an hour today, and our time is up. Thank you very much for coming and sharing information about our history in the Verde Valley on the Inside Cottonwood Show.
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.